ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Bird Calls. I, of course, am your host, David Grubb, and I'm joined by the one and only Mr. Chris Connor. As we get going, we're going to discuss the Pelicans preseason opener and plenty of other topics as we do. Mr. Connor, how are you doing today, sir?
Oh, gee, man, I'm happy that we our second show in about a month or some change. You
Yes,
know what I
sir. It's
mean?
always good to talk to you.
Yeah, good to be here, brother.
Well, we got the preseason going. Pelicans, their only home game of the preseason. And now, with the cancellation of their second preseason game that was supposed to be in Orlando on Friday. And of course, look, the Storm is the number one priority as New Orleanians. We certainly understand what they're going through, and they're with things way bigger than basketball. But it kind of puts more of what we saw in game one under the microscope, because there is going to be so much time for them to practice between game one and game two of the preseason. So let's start with your first impressions, and we have to begin with Zion Williamson, because I think what we saw to Zion in that first game was a guy who looked in preseason, in regular season shape. Physically, he looked as good as we've seen him. I mean, like, just being there in person, but also looking at the pictures after the game, and you're like, you can see where his face is matured. There's a definition there, and his neck is lean. Like, you see, I mean, Zion's a big man. There's no way around that. But he's big in a more adult way. He's growing into his body. And to give you 16 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, steals, and be as active as he was, I just thought that was, you couldn't ask for anything more out of Zion in game one.
Yeah, Grubb, I was talking to Lito, the other day, and we were talking about, is this the best that Zion's looked like physically? And I think when I just look visually, right, versus what I've seen in person and what I've seen on the screen 2 years ago, after the foot, was in my eyes like the best visual looking individual. But that guy was rusty, right? He was completely rusty. Still, he had a lot of things to work back to get to feeling like Zion again, feeling comfortable. It took him 10, 20 games. And we're kind of used to this with Zion. It takes him some time to roughly around that 15, 20 game mark. That's where, okay, some of those instincts, some of those, those shots that we're used to him making, some of those layups that are only gimmies to Zion, you start to see them connect a lot more. And, Monday's game was like, even if he wasn't 15, 20 game regular season kind of Zion, he was probably the most basketball ready that I've seen him in a preseason game to start basketball or to start any preseason game that I've seen him in his time in New Orleans. He didn't look rusty. He, you can tell a lot about Zion being in shape and being comfortable on the floor, getting his legs right under him. When you start seeing him take more jumpers, when you start seeing him take more hooks, when you start seeing him doing just a lot more things that don't revolve him getting layups at the basketball rim. You watch him, he took back-to-back reverse pivot, like little hook shots. That's something that, you don't see the jumper with Zion until, like, if he got to play, once again, 20 games, 30 games. Last year was closer to like 50 games to where we slowly started to see that element. And I think that was the most impressive thing. I think physically, he definitely looks right. He probably has some more, things he has to do, getting, his cardio 100% right, close to the dude that ended last season. But if we're talking about strictly from a basketball perspective, even on the defensive side of the floor, and the effort that he was giving rebounding, 8 rebounds in the first half and 19 minutes for him, you get lucky. You're lucky if you get 8 rebounds in a full game from him. Just shows mentally and from a professional standpoint, he was ready to go, and that's a great sign for him.
Yeah, you saw, I think one of the biggest things was, Zion typically leads the NBA in getting his shot blocked. Against a team like Orlando, where he does not typically play well, his numbers against Orlando last year, he shot below 50% in the 2 games he played against them. He took it to their front court while he was in the game, whether it was as the primary ball handler and creating for Daniel Tice and getting him a layup, or giving it to somebody else and doing something with the basketball, or going as a scorer and going up against Jonathan Simmons, putting his arms in Jonathan's chest and going straight up above him. We've seen where that shot gets blocked. We've seen where Zion does not create enough space because early in the season, he doesn't have that explosiveness that you're talking about to be able to finish over people. He's able to finish through them, but to finish over the bigger defenders, which is what he's going to have to do a lot of this season because there isn't somebody to take that big guy away. They're going to drift a little bit more in his way. So if he can be explosive from the get-go, that's huge. And he did that without Brandon Ingram on the floor. He did that with Daniel Tice. He did that with guys who were not necessarily shooters around him. He created a lot of his own space. So I like what I saw out of Zion, and I liked his, the energy and the activity, I think, is such a big part for him. If he's engaged, and he said this, you'll see it on both ends. And I think that's what you saw, him out on the perimeter, forcing steals, him grabbing those defensive rebounds and closing possessions, and still being able to initiate the offense on the other end, not getting, having to have people wait and force the tempo. He was able to do that, and I thought that was so important. DeJounte Murray, not a great shooting performance to start, but I don't think that that's a concern. The main thing you saw is, again, limited minutes. I think he played 17, 18 minutes, but he gave you 6 assists. Could have had more. And defensively, he did his job for the most part. I think that there's still some positioning that needs to go on with him and Herb Jones. I don't like when Herb is on the back end of the defense and DeJounte is up top, because I think that you still allow penetration. And we saw with Orlando when they were able to make runs, it's because they got their feet in the paint against the guards up top. But I think that's something Willie can certainly refine and work on. But again, DeJounte took control of the offense while he was on the court. And you saw the comments from guys like Zion and CJ and Herb, and just saying, we've got a point guard now. And you haven't really had one on this team in the thought process since Lonzo Ball was playing for this team. Just in that thought process of, let me get these other guys shots where they like it. And you see DeJounte was really active in just generating offense for other people.
Yeah, Grubb, and you saw pace. You saw DeJounte do what they're gonna have to do. Like this team lacking traditional center options so far. I mean, or even established traditional center options. All these different small lineups, even when Daniel Tice is out there, they're gonna have to live in transition. They're gonna have to be deadly on the run and the go. And DeJounte got that immediately. And this wasn't like him getting the rebound and pushing the ball in transition. DeJounte no, I got it. I'll make sure that we end up figuring out making the right play. Some of the unselfish plays, maybe sometimes a little bit too unselfish. But what you mentioned, getting guys the basketball in places that they like it, right? I haven't seen a pick and roll pocket pass to Zion Williamson since Lonzo Ball left. And I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but I can tell you I haven't seen it a whole bunch. It hasn't been a staple. It was a staple during Stan Van Gundy, during Alvin Gentry. Like, that's one of the things that they were able to do consistently, because it puts defenses in situations where you get 2-on-1 options, you get people having to overplay, and those that want to build crowds and build walls to stop Zion, to stop his ability of getting to the rim and getting easy looks, it kind of puts them in a situation where they have to sacrifice something. And now when you have Herb Jones, who knocked down his first 3, as he always seems to do at this point in the corner, when you're going to have a Trey Murphy out there, if Brandon Ingram, if with the training camp, some of the comments that have been put out there and the conversations around him shooting the basketball, and CJ McCollum, and, the list goes on and on, teams have to choose when you get an opportunity to get downhill, what just so happens to work so well for DeJounte. Yes, he wants to he wants to find ways to get other guys involved. But DeJounte downhill, it's comfortable for him. Wasn't always comfortable for Lonzo Ball, right? Because it was, it took some time for him, to kind of get a floater pat, down and pack for him. We saw him struggling sometimes with even attempting certain layups or attempting to, attack the basket. That's not DeJounte. He's comfortable in those areas. He's comfortable in the mid-range. He's comfortable at the free throw line as a passer, as a shooter, or as a finisher. And that helps Zion so much, man, because it takes a little bit of miles off of him, a little bit of responsibility. And teams are going to play Zion the way that they're going to play him, whether he has the basketball or not. But it damn sure makes it more difficult when you have somebody with DeJounte's skill set and his mindset.
How important is it for Zion to be able to run a pick and roll with a guard again? Because we haven't really seen a bunch of that. We didn't see it with CJ. That's not his forte. Was more so when he was doing that with Damian Lillard, because it was two guys working to get a shot from the outside. But with Zion, like you said, those pocket passes, the ability to, when Zion is in the pick and roll, to also have DeJounte as the screener for him, and then come off of those and still have a threat on the other end of that. Not necessarily always have to be big on big and make bigs choose in that regard. It's a much harder choice now to go with DeJounte on the screen or decide to stay with Zion. I think having that pick and roll element for Zion Williamson makes his life so much easier.
Yeah. And I think anything that helped make someone who, I mean, like, we've been talking about, there's a bunch of different conversations that go around Zion's health. Everything goes around Zion's health. And so much of the responsibility is often put on him. Maybe if he takes more jump shots, maybe if he continues to, change his approach a little bit versus consistently everything revolving around tough finishes, going against, guys that are bigger than him, ending up on the ground so often. But in Lonzo Ball's absence, and even with some of the other guys that have been in New Orleans since, we haven't. You wanted to maybe see some of the things you're seeing with DeJounte, with Brandon Ingram, for example. You don't really have many duo, many two-man options that work when Zion's really off the ball. We just haven't been able to see that. You see some where, you see some ghost screens, some flare screens, and so on and so forth. But a lot of times that's when Zion has the ball. If, Trey Murphy's handling the basketball or CJ McCollum's handling the basketball. You saw them, Brandon and Zion, every now and then, after they worked on it in practice, running more pick and rolls, but they just weren't comfortable with it. They weren't comfortable. Zion didn't always set the best screens, and that just wasn't something that I think fit them the way that you wanted it to. It's much more natural when it comes to DeJounte. And one of the things that made Jose Alvarado so essential over the past few years, specifically since Lonzo Ball leaving, is that even the idea, the presence of a point guard or of a guy with that mentality that's played the position, even at Jose's level of talent setup, you could just see a large difference. You add DeJounte, who, in no disrespect to Jose Alvarado, is just a much better, more talented, longer, larger, taller basketball player. I mean, I think it helps guys like Zion not only in how easier it makes the basketball game, but it helps them mentally, because you just don't have to think as much when you have someone out there with, again, that mentality and that skill set.
Yeah, when I think about like the pairing defensively as well with DeJounte and Herb, and Willie talked a lot about how excited he is, and of course everyone is thinking about their potential. And I think this is what you have now defensively to give folks, since we're in the middle of football season and you're wearing your Saints cap. Yeah. DeJounte is your legit corner that just covers wide receivers. Mm-hmm. Like, that's who he is. He's going to be elite at covering wide receivers. Herb is, as we talked about before, is a guy like an Ed Reed, but also a Charles Woodson, a Rod Woodson, where you could start as a corner, and I'm fast enough to deal with corners, but I could play safety. I could play free safety. I could play strong safety if you need me, and I think that having that other guy who can be a shutdown corner for point guards, because I think that's where DeJounte's best. I don't want DeJounte in the middle of the field. You know what I'm saying? If he's playing against the run, that's a problem. I don't want him in that mix. I want him shutting down that guy on the perimeter. Take that guy away. And I think it makes Herb that much more valuable, because at that point guard spot, you have not had, again, a legitimate shutdown defender in a very long time. We're either talking about Drew Holiday for the time that he was here at the beginning of Zion's era, or Lonzo being your best perimeter guard defender. Again, Jose doesn't have the size. He's a nickelback, in this situation. He's
Slap
that
back,
guy
yeah.
who could come in and be the third corner, whatever. But you have not had a shutdown guy. And now you put that for DeJounte, and it just makes both of them so much more valuable because I'm not asking DeJounte to look in the backfield. I'm not asking DeJounte to check on the running game. I'm saying take out their best receiver. Take that guy out. That's all you do. If he lines up on the left, you're on the left. If he moves to the right, you're on the right. But you take wide receiver one, and Herb gets to do all those other things. And I think, the rest of Herb's stats, yeah, he knocked down 2 out of 4 shots. Fine. You know what I mean? I don't care about that. I was glad to see that he was willing to take those shots. He gets all his points in the first 90 seconds because Herb's like letting you know, put it on film that I'm still shooting. 50,
Yeah.
40, 90 wasn't a fluke last year. I'm going to do this again. I appreciate that. But the bigger thing for me is them two getting the opportunity to be on the floor together and start figuring this thing out because they are the linchpins. Everything is going to revolve defensively. And ultimately, if the defense doesn't work, the offense ain't going to work. So it's so important, I think, in the preseason for those two guys to get in sync defensively. And we're starting to see that already a little bit.
Yeah. I think one of the things, and you were of course there for it, Grubb, Media Day. One of the things Herb talked about was when questioned or when asked about the lack of a rim protector and so on and so forth, he mentioned how important it was going to be to just stop guys from getting into the paint. So his relationship with DeJounte, his relationship with others that are going to help make his life easier and maybe take away some of the main responsibilities of Herb having to do everything, they're going to be crucial. And you mentioned to start the show about the alignment and things and trying to figure out just from a formation standpoint when teams run certain looks, like Pelicans are going to have to figure out, like, if they do have DeJounte being the main point of attack defender against point guards or against shooting guards, how do you look to use Herb when teams run high screening rolls and they have your big in action? Or how do you use Herb if they isolate a certain side and teams that like to run certain motions and get guys off screens and get your defense in scramble mode, which Herb actually tends to thrive in, that kind of chaos. It's so critical. And I think that one of the things about Herb, man, that is so interesting, man, he's just always ready. He's always ready for pretty much whatever's called, whatever is asked of him. I love that he was aggressive still offensively. I love that someone that's in his situation that, if he was an insecure individual, could be saying, damn, I just had my best offensive year and now I'm gonna be getting less. I'm gonna be getting less opportunity. I don't think Herb sees it that way. Defensively was still spectacular, still made some really good plays, but his connection with DeJounte Murray, it has to take a different, the step that, even a further step that we tried to see or got close to seeing with him and Dyson Daniels. It has to take an even larger step ahead because these two guys are going to be playing crunch time minutes together every night. This isn't going to be a certain matchup kind of thing. There ain't going to be no offensive subs for DeJounte Murray. That's not going to exist. He's going to be closing every game, and and you can only assume that Herb will be out there with him. It's so important for them to build that relationship and see those two together. How are they able to lead that team defensively and kind of carry the way to where you can see Zion simply being engaged, getting his hands in the passing lane and finding ways just by simply staying close to his assignment and playing off of DeJounte, getting an opportunity to get his hand in the passing lane and get a transition layup opportunity. All those things are going to be special because everything is going to revolve around them in a lot of ways. What this team is currently set up, I think. But it's just good to see Herb continue to be Herb, man. And I'm going to be really curious to see how that connection, specifically on the defensive side of the floor, continues to grow between those two. And in a quest for this team to kind of still try to find a way to stay elite defensively with arguably losing not just one but multiple pieces of what made them elite over the past few years: Larry Nance, Najee Marshall, and Dyson Daniels.
That's, my concern with small ball. And David Griffin talked a lot about her playing essentially the role of Draymond Green, in this defense. He and Draymond are two very different individuals, very different individuals, and with very different roles defensively. Draymond is a bigger player, physically just bigger, taller, wider, not as athletic as Herb, certainly, but he can hold down that post and play center in real ways that Herb cannot. And then the other part is he's the quarterback of Golden State's defense. His responsibility is seeing what's going on and alerting everybody else. Herb really doesn't have that role. Herb's job is far more reactionary in covering for people. He can't be the primary communicator because he has to do. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're relying on Herb to cover that ground to make those plays. He can't tell everybody where to be. So I think that that's something that has to be figured out too, because it's not as simple as saying, well, Herb's going to play the back end of this defense. Herb's going to make these decisions. No, that's not how Herb Jones works. And Zion has already basically told this team, and the team has said in its own way, Zion ain't no 4 or 5 defensively. He don't want that responsibility. No one has really said, outside of the guys who have the C next to their name on the list, that they want to play that 4 or 5 role. Outside of the comments that we got out of Trey Murphy, who said, I gained about 10 pounds. I ain't the lockdown dude on the post, but I'll give it some work. That part, covering who's going to cover that role, I think is the biggest question mark defensively, because when you don't have Tice, when you don't have Misi, we'll get into him, but he looked pretty good for making his debut. When you don't have that length back there, communication is so huge, and guys knowing their responsibilities and communicating with each other and saying, I'm here, I'm in that spot. You don't have to look back and check. I'm there. For guys like DeJounte and Herb, who are going to have, where DeJounte, we don't want DeJounte sliding over into the guarding 3s and 4s. His worth is diminished when he's guarding bigger guys. Point guards and 2s, fine. But that's where I want him. I don't want him playing all over the place. So I think that figuring those things out, and I think that they were hurt by not having Trey and BI for that first game, because you can't work with those rotations as much. I'm worried about that defensively in the first 5 to 10 games of them figuring that part out.
And look, one of the benefits to the people that share the floor with Herb Jones is that, man, sometimes you get to be in almost like a modified zone and just cover an area because of the amount of space and the instincts that Herb travels with, because of everything that he can just cover up by being natural. I mean, he's a hybrid of just talents, man. I mean, I sometimes I think, like, what would Herb look like in baseball, covering playing an outfield, covering space. I think of what would Herb look like as a safety, right? Ed Reed, I love the Ed Reed comparison, but I also see a lot of Palomalu in what Herb does, because it's so much of it is like off script. Random. It's so random and off script. It's like, how'd you do that? How'd you even think to even do that? I don't know if he did. He just reacted. So not only does he have really good instincts, but his reaction time and his execution. You don't catch Herb gamble. Like when Herb gambles, he don't miss. So no. It's special. It's special to watch. But the beauty in that for the others, for a Brandon Ingram, for Zion, a lot of times, man, you just got to stay sound and you got to cover an area, because that guy is going to do what he does. And yes, everything you said about, you want to see Brandon and Trey out there, because look, when we talk about closing games, that's going to be the mixture. All those guys that we named, that's going to be the mixture, and they're going to test out the weight that Trey Murphy added. They're going to they have to. They don't have another alternative, and they have this large mix of talented players. Everybody can't be on the floor to end the game. And if you already don't have a center, you're going to have to go with what you have. Trey might be the guy. So, but not just for him, not just for Brandon, who we've seen when they went small, specifically last year, kind of be the dude that's guarding Clint Capella in certain looks in the post. Be the dude that's guarding Jared Allen for multiple possessions. Not saying that's a perfect remedy, or that's always going to be what they go to, but those individuals that are going to be in space a little bit more, those guys that are going to be a little bit further away from the action and from the basketball, unless they're caught up in switches, it's going to be interesting to see how they continue to help Herb Jones and how DeJounte. I mean, I'm so intrigued by this, man, because there was a period in time last year where Dyson and Herb played so well defensively, and part of it was just because Herb got a chance to flourish off ball. He didn't have to worry about guarding Luka Doncic. Even if Dyson wasn't going to shut him down, Dyson was going to press him 94 feet. He was going to do a pretty solid job, and you could throw him out there on the best perimeter option that the other team had, and some nights you would win. There were matchups against De'Aaron Fox in which you would win, and Herb can just be a menace, reading, reacting, sniffing things out before anyone else you could even think about doing so, man. It's going to be very, very, very intriguing to see how that all works with a team that will probably, I won't say live and die, but the success of their small lineups and the success in how they communicate and how they play defense, team defense, and chain that into rebounding and chain that getting into a transition, it's going to be critical on their success, at least early on, before we start talking about additions if the team is good, or subtractions around the trade deadline.
CJ McCollum, there's not a whole bunch of saying. I think that's a good thing. Like CJ came out, knocked down 3 of 6 from deep, did his job, didn't turn the ball over. I think he had 1 turnover, but otherwise played really solid basketball. And as a veteran, he's been through all these camps. He showed you I can do this, and you sit him down. Like for CJ, he's going to come off the bench. I think that's the role for him early on, especially to provide that offense that while Trey is gone. That's CJ's job, I think, and so we take that from there. And I think for CJ, it's just about conditioning and getting used to that second unit role. But I'm not concerned with CJ ultimately for this team and what he brings to the table.
So wait. That's news to me, Grubb. You believe that?
That's what I believe. Yes.
So you believe based off of what you've watched, what you've seen, and what you heard, that CJ will come off the bench to start the year. I mean, and I would assume that would be kind of, beyond that as well. And is Tice coming off the bench as well? Is Brandon? No.
I think because you're starting Brandon. I'm taking CJ out of the starting lineup and inserting Brandon. So okay. I'm going with DeJounte, Herb, Brandon, Zion, and Tice to start. Okay. And to give that veteran balance to the bench early on. And when Trey comes back, that could be different. They may move CJ back into the starting lineup then, but I think to start the season, it appears to me that they are setting this up because Tice gave you what you wanted to in the first game, gave you 11 points. He was aggressive with his shot. There were a couple times where they ended up on the same side in screens where he wasn't and he's not the best option in the dunker spot. But you don't have a bunch of great options to fill the dunker spot. Let's just be real. So I think that just for balance, to know that in my second unit, I know I've got to score. And we'll get into the other guys in a minute. But to know that I have scoring off the bench, it makes the most sense to put CJ. I'm not putting Herb on the bench. No. I'm certainly not putting DeJounte on the bench. And Brandon and Zion ain't coming off the bench. We just know this. So if you're going to balance the minutes on this lineup, I think early on, that's where it goes. I'm not saying Tice plays 30 minutes, but I think he starts. It's just a nominal starter minutes-wise, but CJ's going to close. Like you said, the best 5 are going to close, and I expect CJ to be on the floor at the end of the games.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a natural transition from most guys that play like CJ and are of the physical stature of CJ. It just is. I mean, everyone jokes about Kevin Durant saying on a championship team, you are a 6 man, and that, being some kind of a of an insult, but I don't think that it necessarily that it has to be. But beyond that, the thing about CJ is that he's so good at us of knowing or attempting to do what's asked of him, whether or not he can execute and thrive in it. Like, he's not afraid of the task. When he first got to New Orleans, it was, can you play point guard? I've never played point guard. So, I mean, but I don't see why I can't. After that, shortly afterwards, well, we need these other guys to shoot. Well, they're not going to really change a whole bunch. So I'll do it. I'll be doing the change. And if it's this year coming off the bench, like, he has adjusted and has been as, I guess, flexible in his approaches in such a short period for this team, for this organization. It's a very underlooked, I think, perspective or point when you think about his importance, because that's a form of leadership that isn't talked about enough. And not only will CJ do whatever's ever asked, he's going to make the best out of it. It ain't gonna always look pretty. He may sometimes end up doing too much, but this dude has supreme confidence and supreme professionalism, and he works his tail off to where there isn't a situation that you can really put him in to where, at worst, he isn't going to think that he can make the best out of it. And I think that that's incredible, to where whether he's simply mainly closing games or he's coming off the bench or whether he's starting, he's so smart and aware, I think, of what, at least when you're putting it together mentally, of what is it going to take from a basketball perspective for certain lineups and situations to work. He was the guy that knew, I got to take more threes. I got to take more jumpers and stay away from some of my favorite areas of the floor more now than ever, than anyone else. I got to make that sacrifice. And this year it's going to be a different sacrifice than maybe we're not expecting, or it could be that natural transition over to being a six man. So, I think that no matter what happens, you got to be happy that it's that particular guy, because even if it's not what he would draw up, like he said, I'm not volunteer to come off the bench, but if it's what he's asked to do, I know he's going to find a way to tackle it, make it a challenge, and make it something for him that's not going to take away from what the team is trying to do. And that says a lot about a guy.
And he's going to prepare like a starter. I think that comment right there that you just alluded to, I think that was CJ's hint. I think he's not stupid. He understands the way the business goes. He understands the way the game is played. And he's the most likely guy. Like, if you're selling any of this, like if you have to sell it to the other dudes, you can't sell coming off the bench to BI. You can't do it. And he would bristle at it. Like, if you came to BI and said, dude, we need you to come off the bench this year in your contract year, when you've been the leading scorer for this team on 3 out of the last 4 seasons, he ain't gonna do that. You certainly didn't bring DeJounte here to do that. And Herb Jones is the guy who makes this work. So any of those guys sitting to the bench, you are making your team less good. But CJ coming off the bench can make your team better. That is possible. Again, the results will play out for themselves, but those are shots that he gets to get. And if we're asking CJ, you ask any Pelicans observer, fan, pundit, whatever, what's CJ McCollum's best skill on the court is shooting. So if he's coming off and he's getting those shots with the second unit, because there is no Najee Marshall to compete with shots with, that Jose Alvarado, even at his best, if he's giving you 10 in a night, you're like, hey, Jose gave us 10. Like, let's be real. But CJ can give you 20 in a quick manner off the bench if he's getting 7, 8, 9 3-point attempts coming off the bench. You know what I mean? Like, that to me is where his value is going to be ultimately. Like, for the rest of his career, if he wants to play for contending teams, whether it's with the Pelicans or they move him to somewhere else, it's going to be in a second unit role, because I just don't see defensively where he makes a difference with your starting unit, passing where he makes enough of a difference with your starting unit. But his experience, his intelligence, and his ability to knock down shots in clutch situations, in early situations, from deep, then I think that's where his value is. Let's talk about BI. Was his absence something or nothing to you for the first preseason game?
It's probably a mixture, man. It's something because it just doesn't make any sense. It's once again something that the messaging that you're getting isn't matching. Like it's not matching what you got or what would make the most sense or the most logic. You know, you talk about everyone has mentioned how important this year is for Brandon, and it's no, I mean, he knows this. Everyone knows this. You know, fitting in a point guard, fitting in another volume ball handler, and so many of these other options and, you know, scoring threats and people that can do different things with the basketball all together. They need time together. And especially if Brandon is trying to really put all of his eggs in like an evolved, you know, basket version of himself. Even that, like, even just because Brandon shoots more threes, it doesn't mean that the team just knows how to react to that. They don't. Those guys have chemistry that's set up based off of what their tendencies are when you are you. Well, if you're showing me a different version, that's something else that I have to get used to. It takes time, and that's just one side of the floor. So, I'm, my mindset always is, Grubb, I don't even care if it's preseason. However many reps you can get, it matters, man. It matters, even if it's preseason. And when the Pelicans have been in these situations often, where they're fitting in new talent, they're fitting in interesting pieces, and we got this. Shout out to Chaz. Chaz brought this up a couple years. Like this was a couple years ago, I think. Where Brandon had like a toe injury, and I think the toe injury kind of it labored throughout the year. But he had a toe injury in the preseason. This was a couple years ago, and Brandon didn't end up. He went from maybe about to play the first preseason game to not playing until the last one. And lo and behold, the season starts, and you can see the team just looking uncomfortable with the first full year of CJ, Brandon, and Zion kind of playing together. They did not look comfortable. There wasn't enough chemistry there. So to me, every rep matters. Every rep in live action matters. And for a dude like that, man, that has so much on the line, I don't care if it's preseason. My mentality is I'm going out there to kill. But, you would assume that maybe it's health related. No, apparently, no, he's fine. Apparently he's healthy. He dominated training camp, right? He was present for 2 days. He's not hurt. So, okay, cool. He missed the first game. Now, like you mentioned, Friday's game is postponed. He's not playing Friday either. It's a 4-day layoff, but he's not hurt. Okay. Well, cool. After that, it's a game on Sunday. Oh no, he's not playing that either. His only game will be the final preseason game, whatever day that is, against the Rockets.
15th,
yeah. You just feel like there's something more that's there. But even outside of that, whatever is involved, whether he's limiting himself for his own protection, whether it is something injury related, regardless, you're back to an incomplete vision, because only so much of what we saw Monday can be taken into real account, because you've seen it so often. Things change when fitting Brandon back into the lineup. Things change when welcoming Zion back into the lineup. Things change when those two are together. And one preseason game and another very important year for this team, that some have really high expectations and others just don't know where it's going to fit. And with so much money on the line for him, it's something, because the words and the logic of it doesn't make sense, but it's also something that I've seen before. So, I mean, I don't know, Grubb. I'm way more interested to hear your thoughts on it. As someone who was at media day, as someone who's who's been at some practices, as someone who's been in the building as of late, to kind of see how things are forming.
We were all surprised. And, I'm going to speak for everybody at the media that I spoke with. And there was not a single person who, this was announced an hour before the tip-off. And it just was, and I was there early. I got there around 10 o'clock, like when things first opened up. So, you saw him shooting around. There were no physical problems as reported. They just said they wanted to give him a day of rest. And like you said, coming off, it seems to me, your only home game, the only one you got at home. If you want to sit out the other ones, fine. But this is your one peak that the home fans get at this. You're trying to build momentum. Like you say, he's coming off this camp where he dominated. Everybody say he was a leader. All these things. Give him 5 minutes, man. Give him 5 minutes. If that's all you got for me today, give me 5 minutes because I need to see this on the floor. Do your coach a favor. Do your teammates a favor. Do yourself a favor. It seems as if the benefits far outweighed any negatives from him playing. If he was tired a little, like I said, just give it to me. Let me see how you respond to spacing. Let me see how you and Zion off ball, which one of you goes where. Let me see it. Because what we see in practice is against our guys who know these plays. And again, you cannot simulate height. And you ain't got a bunch, on the practice court. It's fine that you hear all these things, but you cannot simulate the other team's length and athleticism. Not with any of the guys you got on this roster. So to see it against one of the teams that you're going to play now 2 times, but 2 times in a month, a team that has given your franchise all it can handle in the regular season, has beaten you 10 out of 12 times in the regular season, has exactly the kind of length that you need to see what you look like against. I got to be there for that one. I got to be there for that one to put something on tape that we can adjust to. We can come back to practice with for the rest of this preseason. If I don't play any more games, we at least got this to look at and say, how do we adjust? Because doing that in practice situations doesn't matter the sport. Every player will tell you it ain't the game. It ain't the game. It's not the same. It is not the same intensity. It's not the same contact. It's not the same reactions to the sets that you've been running day in and day out in training camp that everybody knows. Well, now you got to do it against people who don't know, people who don't react the way you expect them to, who can do things that your guys can't do. So I don't like it in that regard. I'm not going to throw Brandon into the fire because he's still got 82 games of regular season to prove himself in. And that's ultimately what this is going to come down to. But to me, when everyone else is making a statement, when everyone else made a statement in that opener of you got an idea of where they're going to be when the season starts, I visually have no idea of what Brandon Ingram really is in his development this year, his physical endurance, how he looks on the court. I got to trust everybody. And it feels like that's the way it's going to be going into the regular season. And that's never a good feeling to have as an observer, where you just got to take people's word for it. I would have loved to see it on the court for real. And it gives you that much more wariness for a team that historically has gotten off to slow starts.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen too many slow starts. We've seen, not to games, to seasons. We've seen this too often to be able to give it the benefit of the doubt and just say, "Oh, it's going to work out," And that's the issue that we run into, to where this isn't like you're going into year 2 or something, or year 3, but this isn't like Brandon Ingram's 23 years old and he's going Brandon's 27, 28 now, just turned 28. Like, this isn't a young player and this isn't an early stage of something. This is year 6 of this regime, of this setup. And more people will probably roll their eyes than give the benefit of the doubt, or just say, don't know. And you have time to where in these games to start to know. They can't, and you're not in a conference, you're not in a situation, you're not going against the talent, you're not in a situation as a team to where you have time to waste. A lot is riding on this season. There are futures, not just from a contract perspective, but if we're talking about their future simply in New Orleans, it's riding on how this season goes. Willie Green's future could be riding on how this season goes. So it's a lot that's at stake. So to me, every minute on that floor matters, man. And practice, it's great that those guys are getting out there after each other. But like you said, that's your own. It's familiar. That's different. You're not trying to kill your guys. Most people aren't wired that way. You're trying to kill the opponent. In not being able to see that, it's almost like too much is taken for granted. And unfortunately, with this team, beyond just how they are as a basketball team, if Brandon Ingram doesn't get hurt at the end of the year, they win 50 games. They win at least one of them games that they lost towards the end. If Brandon doesn't get hurt in Orlando, they win 50 games last year. So you know how quickly it can change when it comes to injuries with this team. If you told me that they were going to get 64, like the most games that Brandon has played as a Pelican, and 70 games from Zion Williamson, none of us would have believed that was going to happen last year. We hadn't seen it. You couldn't give them the benefit of the doubt. It's the same in these kind of situations, man. Between injuries, between fit, between structure, between slow starts, and between the myriad of other basketball questions that that are at play, I don't think you have the room for error to take even preseason games for granted and say, I'll go out there the last minute. They can't afford to procrastinate. They can't afford to pay the bill at the last minute. They gotta be early. They can't afford to show up to the arena on time. They have to be early. They like a black man in corporate America right now. The period. You can't afford to make certain mistakes. You can't afford to make any. You gotta be damn near perfect beyond. And I think there's just so many different things sometimes. And I think Brandon's his appeared approach sometimes, it kind of mirrors other things about the organization, the way that we all right, we got it, we're fine. It's kind of laid back persona. It's like, no, you don't. Not always. Too many things I think are taken for granted sometimes, or we'll figure it out approach.
Mm-hmm.
Think they need more intensity and more, and I'm hoping DeJounte helps with things like this. They gotta be more aggressive when it comes to these kind of things, and noticing even how simple as a 20 minutes in the preseason game can matter for where this team, if this team has goals. If you have goals, I watched LeBron James go out there at 40 years old and play 20, 25 minutes out there with Anthony Davis. They know what's at stake with a new coach. With pretty much a good majority of the same players with a new coach, because they know they got to take advantage of these minutes. It's a perfect time to take the games don't count. The winner losses don't count. I wish that everybody in the organization, and maybe I'm sure that there are some do, but I wish everybody and Brandon included, took that same mentality, taking advantage of this time. Like you said, man, they started off slow too often, and it's another year they can't afford to.
No, not in the West. You cannot cede that ground when, again, the difference between 8th and 6th, it could be one game.
Yeah.
Quite literally, we've seen it. And it's not just last season, but we've seen it in the West plenty of times. Plenty of times where 50 wins was what you needed to get into the party.
Mm-hmm.
That was the minimum, and that could be the case this year. So if you're going to do that, you cannot give away wins while you're figuring things out. It cannot happen. You have to figure out a way to be successful while you're figuring things out. And I think that it's even more harmful because Trey is not there. So you have to modify all of your rotations. You have to modify your placement. The role Brandon has, he's going to play less 3 with Trey out and have to play more 3-4. So if you're going to do those things, let me see it. Let me see it. We could go back. I'd rather have rested him the last 3 because I got to see it in game 1 and be like, okay, we saw enough. Thank you very much. But now you are under this, like you don't have the on-court time in game minutes. And we've seen this compared to the NFL again, this rampant thing the last 2-3 preseasons of quarterbacks not getting reps in the preseason, playing 1 series, 2 series, and calling it a preseason. And then we saw The first 4 games of the NFL season this year were some of the lowest scoring that we've seen in 30 years in the NFL. It's not because players are less talented, because they're getting fewer reps on the practice field in game situations. And I think the Pelicans needed those. All right, let's move to the second unit. Jordan Hawkins was obviously the talk, game high, 18 points for Jordan. Got to the free throw line 7 times, knocked down the 3, knocked down the mid-range shots, showed some ball fakes, able the ability to put the ball on the floor and create a second look for himself when the first one wasn't clean. Look, my thing coming in was people ask me, what do you want to see out of Jordan? I said, shoot it every time you get it. For me, all I want to see from Jordan Hawkins. I understand how Willie Green is, and that defense is his number one consideration. But if Jordan Hawkins is going to stay on the floor, it's because Jordan Hawkins is hitting shots.
Yep.
So him to be aggressive and come out letting it fly, no matter who was on the floor with him, I thought that was a huge thing for Jordan in reestablishing himself as a true threat on that second unit.
Yeah, Grubb, and he looked comfortable. He looked like a veteran in a lot of different ways. Like he looked like someone who had played a year and got mental and physical reps last year and also put in the work. But on top of that, he executed. You know, Hawk can't have 3 for 18 games this year. You know, he can't. Hawk, he doesn't have that. You don't have that luxury on this team that has this amount of wing talent, this amount of guard talent, dudes that can do your job a little bit better than you, even if they're not the same shooter that you are. But the thing about Hawk is, you know, Grubb, is that the mentality isn't lacking. He sees somebody in the mirror. It doesn't matter what anyone else sees. He knows what he sees when he wakes up. Bucket. And he believes, a bucket. And he knows the next 5 going in, no matter if the last 5 missed. And that's special, man. Like you gotta, and it's not like a Lance Stevenson kind of irrational. Like Hawk ain't out there being wild. He knows what he is and what he isn't. If he takes too many dribbles going right, Hawk will stop his dribble and pass the ball back out. You know what I'm saying? Like he knows his limitations. But mentally, in regards to what he was built to do, ain't no limitations there. Shooting right, shooting left, 1 dribble, 2 dribbles, pull up, knows his spots. But he looked comfortable. He looked like a veteran. He looked relaxed. And more than anything, man, like, you know, I know, you know, there's a lot of questions about his handle. But with what maybe he lacks as someone who can take more than, let's say, 3 consecutive dribbles, or someone who may not be able to create in like isolation situations, or even in transition with the basketball, Hawk can get open shots. He's gonna naturally get them based off of his what he does best and the guys he's playing with. But he gets open shots based off of coming off of curls, quickness off of fakes, pump fakes, reputation, closeouts. They're all gonna be open. Get into the free throw line. Teams they respect him like he's been in the league for 10 years. They know who he is. So the open shots are gonna be there. Hawk just has to knock them down. And he looked so comfortable, but more than anything, he executed and he found different ways to sneak. Whether or not he knew he was getting the basketball, there was a play that he was in transition and he was ahead of the play. And a lot of guys, you know, I think he was around the wing. If he was younger, Hawk, what you typically would see him do is shoot to a corner, or maybe he might, you might have shot down the lane and then found a corner that way if you didn't get the basketball. Hawk slowed down, paced himself just in case he got the ball in transition to take a 3. That's work. And guess what? Jose found him. He slowed down and made the shot. So the prep's there, the work ethic's there. Hawk just has to execute and be him. He's gonna get open shots. He's not gonna be a perfect defender. But what are his strengths? He can shoot the basketball, and for his size, he's a plus rebounder, and he's gonna compete. He's gonna compete on both sides of the floor.
Yeah, 2 blocks from under. So
so he's gonna compete. He just has to execute. But like if we're talking mentally between the ears, not worried about that, brother. He's going to figure it out because he ain't scared of nothing.
No, there was a sly smile across his face in the post game when he came in. Like he's like, this is what I do. This is what I do. And you saw that the confidence in the pull-ups, driving to the right, pulling up in the middle of the lane. Like you hate to compare UConn shooters because just because he went to UConn. But the thing that you loved about Ray Allen as a shooter was the repeatability of his form. It looked the same every time. And you see that out of Jordan Hawkins. There's this repeatability to his form where he gets the ball up high, he gets his shot off quickly. There's not a lot of time or motion wasted from when he goes from being ready to shoot to letting it go. And I think that's those are skills that not a lot of people on this team have. You have some very deliberate, even though they're accurate shooters. And he is not deliberate. He is letting that thing go. And I think that, for Jordan, everything is set up for him to claim different roles if he wants them. They are there for him. He can make a lot of questions in a positive way be asked if he does his job this season. He can make decisions harder if he does his job this season. And I think that that's his role, is to come in and don't worry about being the difference maker, but have the mentality of, when I come in, I can make a difference. Like, don't put any pressure on yourself if you don't. There are other guys who are supposed to carry that weight, but you absolutely can carry it for a burst here or a few minutes stretch there. Like, that's what he has to look for. When I come in, man, and those shots are there, I can't turn them down. I can't turn them down. Not if we're going to get to that 40 mark. If we're going to make 43s a game, I cannot turn down open looks. And he didn't look like he was willing to do that on Monday. So more blessings to him in that regard. Jose Alvarado did Jose stuff. 7 points, 5 boards, 3 assists. Jose was doing, had a Grand Theft Alvarado, stole one, when they were getting ready to turn it up court. Do what you do, Jose. We ain't worried about that. Were you surprised when we get to the big men? Yves Missi got a lot of minutes, got a lot of fouls early, but then settled down, played big, and also showed some footwork that I don't think we knew he had around the bucket. Like, he was able to put in some work and make people move when he had the ball in his hands. And then on the other end, were you surprised that Carlo Matkovic, who we have not heard his name at all during the preseason? In the press conference, you don't hear Willie talking about Carlo's growth as a player. You ain't heard, be on the lookout for Carlo. He got like 8 minutes total in a preseason game when you ain't got no bigs. So I was really surprised to not see Carlo on the floor. How about yourself?
Yeah, it was telling. Carlo was out there with Malcolm Hill and Jamal Cain and what was it, Jarek Crutcher? I think
The squadron.
Yes,
the squadron.
exactly, yes. And that may not be a bad thing. I mean, we're talking about a guy that has not played any NBA minutes at all. We're not talking about a Yves Missi first round pick, and we're not talking about a guy that has adequate size for that position. We're not talking about a guy who is flawless when it comes to fundamentals. We're talking about guys that someone who has troubles in things that amplify when you're playing NBA minutes. If you struggle with fouls in the summer league, you are going to have problems in the NBA. It's gonna be even worse when you're when you're out there playing against the Dallas Mavericks. If you struggle with setting screens, if you struggle with rebounding and some of the smaller, the around the edges, the important details with being a big man in this league, they don't get any better when you're out there playing in the NBA. I know Carlo is a really good athlete. I know Carlo has some good summer league games, but I know or even with the squadron, but they're not asking Carlo to do much of anything if he's out there for a few minutes. He's going to have to do, ironically, some of the things that he struggles with right now. You're not, nothing's being, you're not crucial parts of actions. And that's what I'm curious about with Carlo. It's really tough to see because even in his minutes to end the game, he didn't have a basketball. So if Carlo was going to have to make a play, it was going to have to be an offensive rebound. It was going to have to be a defensive rebound. It was going to have to be scraps. And that's what these centers, whatever center's playing, has to thrive at. I don't know if Carlo can do it yet because he hasn't been in enough of the situations, and we haven't seen it against high talent groups. So I know Tice can do it. He's been used to it his whole career. He knows that, all right, well, scraps. I'll take my opportunities when they're given to me, but in the meantime, I'll get a couple rebounds here. I'll get a tip in. I'll make this shot here. The open three when I get it. I'll box out. I'll set screens. That's how you stay in the league as long as a guy who is undersized and wasn't on anybody's radar coming into the league necessarily, like Daniel Tyson State. Yves Missy, a little bit different. I was surprised that the minute that he entered the game, it was almost like we are going to run him out here until he fouls out or he gets tired.
Mm-hmm.
Like what I thought would happen with Carlo a little bit earlier, and them just throwing him out there and just seeing what it looks like. It's what happened with Yves. And yeah, speaking of foul trouble, 5 fouls in 7 minutes? Absolutely. Did he end up on the ground way more often than I would like a guy his size to do? I mean, it was bad. In what, less minutes than Zion? You'd have told me he would end up on the ground more than Zion, I wouldn't have believed you. Did he? I
mean, they were clowning him in the beginning. The Wagner brothers were like laughing at him when he would go down. They're like, "Why are you on the floor again?" And it was just, but he got himself together.
But I mean, I will say, I see the vision. I see what they saw. I didn't think we would get a. I don't want to disrespect Akeem Olajuwon, but. I can't call it a dream. It wasn't dream-like, but it was something, along the baseline there. I didn't know he had that game to him. But some of the things that I did see were things that I saw with Baylor. He has so much patience. There's an art to rolling off of a screen in basketball. There's an art to it. Some people, Jackson Hayes, right, for example, I'm looking for a oop every time. I am jetting off. Misi watches his steps. He's playing that game of catch between the low defender there to where either A, I'm getting an alley-oop here, or the defender's gonna latch on to me and DeJounte Murray gets, an easy wide open mid-range just getting to his spot. He understands space. He does.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's crucial. He's not clumsy. He did end up on the ground, but I think that's a strength thing. But he's not clumsy. He's not a guy, who's goofy, who's gonna drop the ball. He doesn't look like he doesn't belong out there. Just physically, he isn't there, and he's raw. I like the mentality, the attempt. But man, Jonathan Isaac is Jonathan Isaac. You want to go try to dunk on Jonathan Isaac? Go for it. Didn't work. But I like the attempt because those are some of the things that you are going to have to do. Was he off the ground a little bit too much defensively, trying to swat everything? Sure. Is that going to get him in trouble? Yeah, but guess what, Yves? If you out there for the New Orleans Pelicans opening night, you can foul out as many times as you want if it's not hurting the team. You know what I mean? If it's not putting the team in bad situations, you might get a chance to use all them damn fouls because they don't have anyone that's even close to giving them what you can. Some of the things even trailing ball handlers that are driving towards the basket, his ability to be there as a shadow. You don't have anything like that. Even the contest, you don't have anything like that. I think he even got one. Got a block there. There ain't gonna be a bunch of guys that's just gonna simply consistently go out there. He's a rebound magnet just based off of size, but he for someone who hasn't played basketball very long, he doesn't look like you wouldn't have been able to tell me as much of in some ways a mixed bag of a performance that was. You wouldn't have been able to tell me that he just started playing basketball necessarily. There's something there. There's something there.
Yeah, you compare him to what we saw out of Jackson. And like you said, Jackson was all run and jump. But without purpose. You know what I mean? Just doing it like that's what I do. Like you said, every time it's a screen and roll, is his responsibility in his mind was roll. It's never slow down. It's never fade a little bit. It's roll. Throw that thing up. And if you don't, I'm out to play.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, there ain't nothing else for me to do here, dog. Defensively, if it wasn't run at that block, I'm not doing that. I'm not boxing out. 5 rebounds. If how many times did Jackson Hayes give you 5 rebounds in the minutes
And
that Messi
in
gave?
20 minutes, in 25 minutes, not,
You know what I'm saying? So, like, for me, yeah, his instincts were right. And like you said, when he got blocked by Jonathan Simmons, I'm sitting there and I said, nobody went up with 2 hands and he went right at him. That's a play in the NBA that a lot of times you could get the foul on against a lesser defender. You went up against an all NBA defender and tried that. You go up against most guys, he's got a good chance, if at least not getting to the line, of finishing that play. And there aren't a lot of guys on this team, again, that you're talking about who have that height, who are going to sit in that dunker spot and be able to take one dribble or no dribbles and finish at the rim. So if you're in that rare group who can do that, and you need those 6 fouls, and you're going to need them against Derek Lively, you're going to need them against Zach Edey, you're going to need them against Alperen Şengün, you're going to need those guys. You're going to need him to do those things. And what you saw out of him in game 1 is, I'm willing to do whatever you ask me, coach. Whatever you ask me to do, and I got some other stuff. Because that footwork on the baseline, nobody was looking for that. We were hoping, can you throw him a lob? Can he finish off a second chance? No, like you said, it wasn't a dream shake, but it was a shimmy. It was a shimmy. We'll start with a shimmy. We'll work on it from there. But hey, he turned over the right shoulder. He did the right things. He planted his foot in the proper place, and there was nowhere to go. He was under the goalpost, under the basket. He wasn't out front, so he had to maneuver in that space. That's great instincts, and he had soft touch. So you give him all of the credit in the world. I think it's showing that Carlo's an offensive big, and that's not what the Pelicans are really looking for. You have that in Tice, and Tice will shoot the shots that you want, but that second guy has to be a defender, and I think that's where Carlo is at a disadvantage. He is not a defender, and there aren't going to be any plays ever run for Carlo with this team, and that's just for now. Yeah, you continue to develop in Birmingham. Hopefully you find that role and they can bring you back at some point, but I just don't see him being a factor for this team this year.
Yeah, because look, man, there was some possessions to where Messi just looked out of place, but certain things he's gonna have to just learn by just being out there. And, you never know, first game jitters, so on and so forth. But he is an option that this team just simply doesn't have. And look, I will say that it's not like, you're going to be out there. You're out there 30 minutes. This team's going to play small. This team is going to give, you have someone in Daniel Tice is going to be out there 20 minutes a game. And we're just talking for, until if the team is good enough, hopefully, you would assume that they will add an upgrade and add even more. I think that Messi has a long way to go, but at least I left and said, I see it. I see it. I see the vision when or if they can put it together. I see it because
he's a basketball player.
Yes. He's not just an athlete. He's not just someone out there running and jumping. I can see a basketball player, a big. And the thing is that for this particular team, your list of responsibilities of being a big, there's so it's such a small list of things you have to do. You don't, if you're out there with Herb Jones, if you're out there with DeJounte Murray, hell, if Zion's right and he's out there weak side, your list of responsibilities aren't that large. So you can allow so many things in the game of basketball to come to you. Sometimes you will be rewarded just by being big and tall, so part of me loves the fact that he is such a raw prospect of sorts because he doesn't come in established with a set of ways. Some of Carlo's ways feel set already from playing so many different. It's not always good playing in different organizations and setups and different roles. That's not good for everybody.
Right.
What the Pelicans are going to ask Messi to do is no different from what he was asked to do at Baylor. It's no different from whatever the hell he was asked to do before then. It's going to be nothing will have changed. If Messi goes to Birmingham, they're not going to ask him to do anything differently. And the list goes on and on. And that's going to be so good for someone like him, because to me, that's how you get Clint Capellas. That's how you get DeAndre Jordans. That's how you get Tyson Chandler. That's how you get, when you simplify a game for, or even a Derek Lively last year, when you simplify a list of responsibilities in a game and you surround them by good and smart players, and they have the athleticism and the size to go with it, sometimes it just takes care of itself. And he could be one of those guys. You're just gonna have to deal with some of the ugly parts, because they will come.
Oh yeah, especially in year one. Especially in year one. You know, being a big is like being a left-handed pitcher. It don't click early. It takes a minute, but we'll see. And like you said, I see the vision. It does not feel like an experiment. It feels like it just requires experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a big difference. You're not trying to make him into something. You're just trying to get out the best that he already has.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest part that I want to talk about with Willie Green, because this is, like you said, this is a huge year for Willie. Look, 4th year in, you've improved every year, but you still have not gotten a playoff series win. And a lot of this is going to be about him changing his philosophy and embracing Borrego ball. He got up 43 pointers against the Magic. They only made 12. But let's look at it like this. Pelicans have raised their three-point percentage from 348 his first year to 364 last year. Top 4 in the league in percentage. Last 2 seasons, this team is 13-4 when they shoot 40 or more threes. The last 2 seasons when they shoot 36 or more threes, because 40 is a hard number to get to. So let's bring it down to just a little bit. You know what I mean? Every night you can't get to 40. But when they get to 36 or more threes, they are 24-13 the last 2 seasons. 67-60 in all their other games. That is a huge and significant winning percentage difference. So to me, and more than ever with this team, the 3 is a necessity. More than ever, it is a necessity. It is not something that you can be good at and, hey, we might have to shoot some. No, every night you got to get them things up. Every night you got to shoot them that rock. So to see Willie Green say, I have changed what I view a good shot as being, I get it. And I got to be okay with guys missing 3, 4, 5 in a row, as long as they're the shots that we want in this offense. I got to be okay with that. To see Willie grow in that way, and yeah, I think the shots were a little inflated by the reserves who were all putting up threes, but at least you see the mentality. Guys are executing the game plan as desired. How big is that if we're going to get consistent buy-in? And how much, again, not having Brandon on the floor and seeing what that rate of threes looks like with him on the floor, that just, I would have loved to have seen that.
Yeah, because it has to be, this has to be a team-wide buy-in. Or, I mean, at worst, it has to be a buy-in from your most important players. You know, it can't just be the specialists. It can't be just CJ McCollum. Like this team can't afford that. The way that they're set up, and some of the, the clunkiness of parts of their roster, they have to be able to buy in across the board. It can't be another Brandon said mid-range look good. Nah, can't be that. That 3 got to look good too. And I think for Willie, yeah, I mean, at that point, it's accountability across the board. It's him being less stubborn and being more open to seeing other ways to success, even with maybe his principles not being challenged. And I think that's the thing that we all got to figure out. Like, it doesn't mean that Willie's principles when it comes to basketball are wrong, but could they use a little bit of fine tuning? Are they, in maybe some ways, outdated? If Willie's actions match what he said, and I thought that was one of the more refreshing things I've heard from Willie, for him to admit that I've had to change. It was a great question, and I saw you post it. But for him to admit that, yeah, I got to change my approach. I have to grow, and that bodes well for guys like Jordan Hawkins. That bodes well for young players and young talent. I get the feeling that, with Willie, the veterans, no matter how they arrive, once you're a veteran, you got a little bit of leeway of being able to play however you play. Because Jose Alvarado didn't know. Jose Alvarado was the king of taking momentum shots that would be considered bad. That maybe Jose shouldn't be taking. And CJ McCollum has earned the right to do that, and he would do it as well. But you've been, you either A, match his type, or B, you're a veteran. You've seen it enough to where even if I don't love that shot, you took it. So it's fine. Well, how does Jordan Hawkins, how do some of the young players, the young talents get that same respect and I guess leash of sorts? And you've seen it with, maybe some question marks about the relationship between Jordan Hawkins and Willie Green and the inconsistencies in playing time and just how that's ultimately being used. I mean, we went from talking about, Jordan Hawkins making a rookie team or being one of the more impactful rookies in the league to start the year to where he just couldn't see the floor, specifically at a point. But struggles specifically with a lot of guys in their shots and the type of shots that they took in slumps impacted if we would see them. Jose, there was a point to where when Jordan started playing, it was a couple games where Jose didn't touch the floor. Dyson went through a stretch to where maybe we just can't have you on the floor right now versus you're figuring out a way to work around that. And I think that just, that bodes well for, we saw the inconsistencies with Trey Murphy early on and Willie and guys like Tony Snell and, Garrett Temple and later, I mean, you name them getting run over Trey. Later, Josh Richardson. Willie being able to kind of step back and say, this is where the game is headed. This is what I have. This is what I need to lean into. I think is, it's important because he's going to have to bring that mindset across the board in a lot of different areas. And that's what his staff, that's what Borrego, that's what his players. You got a lot of offense now, and that's what your new point guard. Yeah, I mean, look, man, everything is nice and fun right now. Let this team lose three games in a row doing something the old stubborn way, something that ain't working. I know one particular new player that's wearing number 5, the new number 5, that's gonna have something to say. Is Willie able to be challenged and take that and turn that into a positive? These are all the different things, but simply with changing even a small part of that approach, with viewing how you see 3-pointers, what's a good shot and a bad shot. That's the step alone of the I think a positive direction to kind of, changing some of those other elements as well. Willie, like Brandon Ingram, can't afford to be stubborn. He can't afford to live or die doing things his way this year going forward. He has to be as open to criticism, as open to new ways, as open to fresh and newer ideas as ever.
And that, DeJounte talked about on Media Day that he was not afraid, that afraid is not in his vocabulary, that he will say the things that need to be said. And for Willie, it's a different type of discipline now. Whereas before, like you said, guys like Jordan Hawkins look to the bench when they miss 2 shots. Like, am I coming out at the next whistle? You would see Najee already sliding up to the sideline. You see somebody else already coming up, take you out. Well, now, are you going to be disciplined that way when guys pass up good shots, when guys are not taking the 3, when the offense is slowing down and guys are over dribbling? And I'm not saying this to single anybody out. It's for this entire team that, like you said, it has to be buy-in from 1 through 12. Even Zion took a 3 on Monday, and he usually don't fire him up, but he let it go in the flow of the offense. Everybody's going, and especially again, with Trey out, you're talking about minus 8 threes a game. You take Najee out, that's another 2 or 3 per game. Dyson, that's 1 or 2 per game. Jonas, that's 1 more per game. So let's say you're taking out, let's say on average 13 or 14 3-point attempts per game. That's what you're taking out of the lineup from last year. So I got to replace those. CJ, even at his rate, he can't take no more. He led the NBA in attempts last year. So I can't ask him for more. It's everybody else has to give me more. DeJounte has to give me good looks from 3 when he gets the opportunity. Brandon's got to give me 5 to 6 threes every night. He cannot turn those down. Herb has got to give me 4 to 5 every night. Attempts, you got to give them to me. There's no choice here, fellas. And I think that for Willie, too, is one thing to tell him to get him up and hold that discipline. But are you going to sit a guy next to you for a minute and be like, hey, we need these shots, man. What are you doing?
Mhm.
You can't just pass these looks up. You got to be a threat. And he's got to do it every night and be consistent with that too. So I think it is a test for Willie. But like you said, for him, it's rare when you get a head coach to say, this is something that I struggled with. And you specifically say, I let James Brago. He's telling me I got to trust him on this. And having to bite your own tongue and to go against your own instincts that say these are good versus these are bad shots. And no, he said, like, we've proven over time that we're a pretty good shooting team, but am I going to let my guys get them up? And it's their responsibility to continue to earn that trust, to take the right shots, to not just fling them up there, as you said. But yeah, it's a test for everybody, and they've all got to stay committed to it every night. You ain't gonna get up 40 every night. I get it. Teams are gonna play you different ways, but it's the act of aggression. We're going to do this with intent. This is part of who we are now. It cannot be something that you try to do. It has to be something that you do. This is who we are.
And for it to be who we are, it has to be who I am, right?
Yes.
And that's the thing. Like, can't be, well, I guess this is just how we have to play, guys. No, this is how we have to play. This is how we survive. This is how we are going to win. And I mean, like you said, it's a numbers game. All the guys that you mentioned, CJ can't take them all. Even if the CJ gives you 25 of them, 25%, that's not like you got to make up for the rest, and your best players have to contribute in it. And I think, man, just that's just evolving, period, man. Like, I think conversations like these are always good, I think, for men, because Willie's almost 40, I think, right? He might be 4, I don't know, but he's in that area, and it just shows, man, you never stop learning, you never stop growing, you never stop evolving, you never stop having your thoughts challenged or being brought up to to stage, to where you have to think, am I tripping here? Do I need to retool how I'm moving forward? Because the game is gonna continue to evolve and change. It may even revert back. I mean, that's evolution. Things that we know 20 years ago will be back 20 years from now. It's just how it is. But are you like Bruce Lee, man? Are you water? Are you shapeless? Are you formless? And I think, for Willie, that's just, you can't get guys that eventually get caught or stuck in their ways. The ones that can afford to do it, sometimes are bailed out by success, or they have something that has worked for such a long time to where it's like, no, I've won this way. I have success at a high level winning this way. This way works. When you haven't won anything, when you haven't won a playoff series, when you've been riddled with some level of inconsistency, you can't afford to be that way. You got to, in some ways, go with the flow. You got to listen to your players. You got to listen to your staff. You got to listen to the numbers, the analytics. You got to be a little bit of everything. And that might mean changing and switching identities until you find something that becomes your stamp, your print, because he'll always be able to mix in his principles and the things that he loves. Defense ain't going nowhere. You know what I'm saying? Grit ain't going nowhere. Tough players ain't going nowhere. Second round picks making it through the mud, they ain't going nowhere. The brother K, it's an addiction, Grubb. Man, we were laughing about it with Buku not too long ago. But the way he was talking about Antonio Reeves, oh my God, he can't help himself. Dudes, there's just a certain, he got a type. He got a type, and that's okay. We all got types. Willie got a type, but just because you have your favorites, it doesn't mean you can't be open to other different styles of success, other different styles of beauty. You know what I mean? And I think I hope he's learning that now. Because the things that he loves will never change about the game. They'll always be present. Just got to add more to things that he accepts, likes, and loves.
It can't be all booty. Like, if you're a booty man, it can't be all booty. If all she is booty, like, eventually you're gonna get tired of that. You know what I'm saying? No matter what, even if that's your type, I need some face, I need some legs, I need some personality, all these things. Can't just be booty.
Yeah, man.
That gets boring after a while. And adaptability to be more, highbrow, but adaptability is king. It is king. And you can have your principles, as you said, you can have your principles, but you have to be malleable in them. You have to be able to adjust them based on your personnel. Because no matter what, yeah, if I change the style of your lineup, if I take your players away and give you a new set, and you only know how to win this way, and to like make it an example too, Parcells and Payton. Payton is the disciple of Parcells.
Mm-hmm.
Parcells to me is one of the most underrated winning coaches in the history of the NFL because Parcells could take it everywhere. Everywhere he went, different players, different systems, different styles, but he had his basic principles. Do it in New York one way, do it with Bledsoe another way in New England, do it a different way with the Jets. Still the only coach that we've had with credibility since Jimmy Johnson with the Cowboys. You know what I'm saying? Sean Payton had it with one guy, one way, and that way. It ain't working the same in Denver. You know what I'm saying? It ain't working the same. That genius label ain't there right now for him in Denver because you ain't getting the same results. You ain't turning Bo Nix into Drew Brees. That ain't happening. It didn't work with Russell Wilson. You haven't figured it out. And I think that's a test of a coach's stubbornness. What's your type? Sean Payton's still picking the same type, but it ain't the right type for what he needs to win games today. Dennis Allen was his type. The criticism of Dennis Allen, he can't figure out how to change with what he's got to make it work, to make a team work. So, yeah, it's one thing when all the pieces are in place for you to have success. But now Willie Green, I think, is finding out who he really is as a coach. Because I think when you're a new coach, you have to hold on to those things because you're the only one who's came in the building believing them. You know what I'm saying? You got to get everybody on your page. But now you see the book is a little thicker. You know what I'm saying? You see how deep, how many pages, how many chapters there really are. And if you want to get into this for a long time, if you want to be able to go and whether you want to stay in New Orleans for 20 years and build a culture here, or you want to keep going and be the kind of coach who makes a career of this, you better figure out how to adapt and make different styles of play work for you. Yeah, there'll be a time. Absolutely. If he had Twin Towers, if he had the DeMarcus AD team, no, maybe you don't want 43s going up tonight. But that's that group of players. You got to do something different there. With these guys, this is what's necessary. And like you said, if he wasn't committed to it, if he wasn't sure of it, if he doesn't walk in the locker room and say, I believe in this, and y'all, and Willie can't lie. Willie's one of them dudes that, come on, dude, you can't pull off the lie. They gonna read it. We gonna read it. We know if he's not really into something. He believes in this. He has to. And I think he understands what he's coaching for. He understands the stakes. It's all going to be, do the other guys get it? And I'm hopeful. After what I saw Monday, I'm hopeful. But we've seen this team too many times, I think, to be beyond that. I wouldn't have a problem telling every fan, be optimistic, sure. Be optimistic. There's still holes. There's still things that clearly defensively you want to see improve as far as stopping people getting in the paint. Are you going to rebound every night? Yeah, they won the rebound. They won all the good stats against Orlando. You outshot them from the field. You outshot them from three. You out-rebounded them. You slightly lost the rebounding battle, but you won it on the offensive glass. You won points in the paint. You won fast break points. Those are all great stats in a preseason game. On a night-to-night basis, how many of those do you really win? How well does this team hold up? Health-wise, I think, again, that's the final question I'm asking you is, can you really play? We've never seen a team play small ball for 40 minutes a night. We've never seen it. The teams that Griff wants to talk about, I think it's an unfair comparison to talk about the Phoenix Suns. I think it's a really unfair comparison to compare this team to the Golden State Warriors. Let's not do that. That's not fair at all. But we've never seen a team say, this is what we're committed to, and not have some type of all-NBA defender in the front court. And some level of that. I think it's going to the physical health of this team, even more so than last year or any other year with Zion Williamson. Man, these guys have to stay healthy. They have to stay healthy. And so the only way to do that is by playing the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. They don't have the, you going out against certain, you could argue good majority of the matchups that you're out there, you're punting, rebounding off the jump, at least in the start, at least in, with the starting lineup. So your thought process has to be, We don't necessarily have to get in a shootout, but we gotta punch first. It don't mean we gotta be Sacramento from a couple years ago. It don't mean like even you're not gonna be Golden State, right? You don't even know what's your special. Like, we Warriors had a knob they could turn on to start third quarters. That became like part of their legacy. We don't know what the Pelicans have when it comes to that yet, right? Suns, completely different story. You mentioned, you don't even have an Amari Stoudemire or even in the later years, a Marcin Gortat or a Boris Diaw. Like, you don't. It's fun to name all those different individuals, but you aren't necessarily built like that, and you surely don't have. You have more playmakers and more guys that need to be involved than those Phoenix teams did, right? Everything was predicated in Phoenix. A lot of it was pick and roll, and it was Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire and a bunch of different role players. Sure, you added other guys, but it was a bunch of space, and it was mainly a two-man. A lot of different ways, but one guy controlling a good majority of the offense, and it worked for everything and everybody. This team isn't built like that, so that's a whole different conversation. I think, though, when you think about some of the things that you almost have to go into games knowing we're going to lose right away, you gotta hit first. You gotta hit first, and you gotta force the other team to either A, quit or change right away. Some games, certain matchups, it's worked. But what's interesting, and someone told me this the other day, and I think that they'll have more success than some people think with it. But what I do struggle with is it going to be more successful when it's something you turn on to start a second quarter or in a first quarter and beat teams over the head with going into the second half and make them having to adjust that way? Or is it something that you can start out games blazing with and get a 5-10 point lead and make teams have to say, well, how am I gonna? It's 2 games I can think of. 3 games. Phoenix game in Phoenix, where the Pelicans went small. They found the lineup that they wanted, and Phoenix just said, all right, Royce O'Neal, we got to see Nurkic. There was nothing that Phoenix could do at that position at some point. Even when they went small with KD, they ran out of options. They ran out of stops to dealing with that particular lineup and the comfort the Pelicans got in. Golden State, same kind of thing. Looney was out there, for periods. I think that was the game they were missing Trace Davis. But we know how special Draymond. And listen, Golden State traditionally has punked the Pelicans in a lot of different matchups. They did not last season, and they didn't in that final game. The Pelicans, who were down early in that game, came back when they went small. Would it have been as powerful if they started off that way? I'm not sure. Clippers game earlier in the year. Ty Lue, who in game is one of the better masterminds and chess piece mover that you're going to find in regards to saying, making this move right here. Between PJ Tucker, between Plumlee, between Zubac, couldn't find a way to figure out what to do with Zion when the Pelicans went small. Turned the whole game upside down. Are you able to bring those level of changes and matchup issues and get teams to have to play and change to the style that you're playing to start games? That's what's going to be interesting. And that leads us back all the way to the beginning. If you're not all on one string, if it's still questions on how it's all going to fit together, are you even able to do that? That's the question that I have with this team. Because if they're not in situations where they're overwhelming teams, where they're the ones that's, controlling how the pace and how the lineup formatting is going to go, and your small lineup becomes a detriment when you're in hell because you don't have many alternates. You don't have many other things to really throw out there. You don't have many rebuttals or many different switches or like you're not there as a roster. You don't have the options. So you almost have to win playing that way, which could cause certain guys to be in harm's way a little bit more, which could put guys in situations they don't need to be in. So that's what's going to be curious. I think it can work, but until we see everybody buy in, it's really hard to see. And they gotta no more of Jose Alvarado coming in and saving and changing games. You might be able to do that with Jonas on the floor and you coming in with Larry Nance. You ain't gonna be able to do that with Daniel Tice starting. You ain't gonna be able to do that with, when you go completely small, some lineups.
I'm gonna give my last baseball analogy on this one.
Yep.
You can, it's like a pitcher who's got a dominant fastball that nobody's seen before.
Uh-huh.
You can make it around the league one time with that fastball, striking people out with that fastball. You can make it around. But when they adjust to your fastball and they sitting on it, now that fastball is being deposited in the seats.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a changeup? And that's the thing for the Pelicans. They have to find their changeup. And right now, we don't know what that is. Because as much as they talk about interchangeable, it's interchangeable at one place. It's all at one place. Through 1 through 3, sure, you got all the interchange you want. 1 through 3. 4 and 5, not so much. That cupboard is thin. You don't have, you can't say, oh, they're killing us big. We need to bring in the bigs. What you gonna do? Put Tice and Messi on the floor together? We're not gonna see that. So yeah, you don't have a choice right now. It's got to work. And that is a hard play. That's the thing that holds me back too, is because there is no plan B here. Not without a trade. In-house, there's no plan B. It is all or nothing on this. And like you said, when you talk about a Phoenix team, you're talking about a Hall of Fame point guard who put up historic shooting numbers and ran that 1-2-man game, him and Amari. Everything came off of that. And everybody out there learned, hey, we're going to shoot threes. Grant Hill come in, Grant, you shoot threes. Somebody else come in, you shoot threes. Whomever they brought in, they understood the assignment, shoot threes. And they were long, too. Same with Golden State. You talk about a team that had playoff success before it added the lineup of death.
Mm-hmm.
You had some success. They had been to a second round before. They had been in the playoffs, and then you added all the guys that they brought in were veterans. You had an Andrew Bogut who had been a former number 1 pick, says, I understand I'm not that anymore. My job is to do this. You have an Andre Iguodala. I'm no longer Denver Andre. I'm no longer Philly Andre. I'm a 6-man now. So this is what I do. Sean Livingston, I'm multiple knee surgeries and star status removed, but I'm going to come in and knock down these mid-range jumpers and play great defense. You knew what everybody understood the assignment and what their individual roles and responsibilities were, and they mature enough in those to say, tonight I might get 4 points, but tomorrow I may get 13.
Yep.
And I'm okay with that. Is everybody on this team okay with that? Is everybody on this team okay with not being the guy, except for Zion, who knows that every night the rock is coming to him? Mm-hmm. He's the only one. I'm sorry, I hate to say this for Brandon folks, but there are going to be nights he doesn't get all the shots. Yep. Zion every night. This team is going to go through that dude wearing the number 1 jersey. Yep. Everybody else, your shots on a night-to-night basis are up for grabs. Are you cool with that?
Yep. And it's a lot of money on the line for certain guys that got to answer those questions. And money gets in the way of sacrifice a lot of times, man. So, we'll see, man. I think it's going to be interesting. I can see how it works. I can see how they struggle. Some of the flaws look blatant. Others may be overplayed. But we go into another year of really not knowing because we haven't seen.
That's the great unknown with this team, the great unknown. And it feels like the variables, the X's and the Y's in this equation are always so hard for the New Orleans Pelicans. And I feel, Chris, I'm going to let you give your number. If you were given a number today on wins, I'll be fair. I'll be fair to you. I'm not going to pin you to a number. But if I had to make you put some money on it, is it 46 or more or 45 or less?
I still think that they get 46 or more. I think that even with their flaws and even with some of the, they're gonna play some teams that just bully them and just make them look like they don't belong. I just think the way NBA regular seasons work now, where it's just so much about survival, so much about the war of attrition, the resting of certain players and just how seasons go with so many scheduled wins that are almost kind of there. I think they learned how to beat up on bad talent, bad teams last year a little bit more. And I think their top heavy talent depth is going to save them. It's going to allow them to beat teams that on the second night of a back-to-back they typically wouldn't be able to beat if Zion sits out, or if Brandon and Zion sits out, because you still have CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, and DeJounte Murray. You have guys that are used to being in situations where it's their night, it's their basketball, and it's their team. I don't know if you would ask me, do I think they can win a playoff series that's currently set? I'm not sure if they can, because so much of the playoffs is about
driven for them.
Yeah, it's matchup driven, and like you said, you gotta have a changeup, and your changeup doesn't exist. At least last year, at worst, you said we could start Larry Nance in the second half, or we can go to Zion at the 5, or Herb, we'll Trey at the 5, whatever the case may be. You don't have that right now, so series a little bit tough. But we talk about survival in the regular season. I think they're going to be some games where they beat some really good teams, where they overwhelm some folks. Some games where they get embarrassed, and they're going to be, that middling ground, and those bad teams in combination with the schedule. I think that you can pick 50 wins for this team just strictly on the amount of talent that they have alone, and the way it's not like you're putting it all together at once necessarily. You're adding, DeJounte Murray, you're adding a guy here and there, but a lot of your main guys have played enough together. Coaching staff, for the most part, is if there's enough familiarity there to where I think that they can pick up a little bit where they left off in there, but now they're still going to have to find their new voice with this new team as well.
Yeah, I think my thing for them is, like, I agree with you that on nights when they've got an advantage, whether it be rest or travel or whatever, they're going to be hell for other teams to deal with, because if they're fresh and they can run up and down the court, not a lot of folks ain't gonna want to run with them on the second night of a back-to-back. If it's the last game of a road trip, you ain't gonna feel like running with these kids. But yeah, it's gonna be those nights where you have to play 2 in a row in the same city, when you get those kind of series type things, and they get to figure you out from a game to a game, or against those elite bigs. Those nights when you are facing against the elite bigs where they get really tested. But yeah, bad teams, stay out this team's way, because they're going to enjoy it. They're going to enjoy it. They're going to enjoy those nights, and they're going to relish those. But I think it's, that health question is the lingering thing too. Can you get through the season healthy, and then how quickly does Trey come back? Like, if this hamstring thing is something that bothers him for a while, I hope it isn't. But you just never know when it comes to hamstrings. If it's something that's just 5 games, or if he's ready to go to start the season, if that's fortunate enough that that's the case, he's good to go. That's a huge bonus for them in getting the kinks out of the way. I think those first 10 games are going to tell us a lot as far as just that buy-in. The buy-in. I'm looking, if they've got to go 500 in the first 10. Like, if you get off to a 2-8 start, if you get off to a 3-7 start, it's going to be hard, because that's when guys do that thing of, we losing doing this, and we was winning when I was. Yep. So I'm going to go back to what I was doing when we were winning.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not a habit you want to kick in with a lot of new guys around. So we'll see what happens there. But generally, I think, yeah, ultimately the win total doesn't matter. I think there's still a team that's fighting for 7, 8, 9, 10 because of the depth of the West. And with a good push, they can get out of that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if they're going to win a series, they got to be a 5. You know what I mean? 5 or higher. If you're going to win a series, it's just too hard to win 4 games on the road.
Yep.
To win that when you got to go on the road as much. And the top of the West is going to be really hard. It's going to be really hard. Yeah. We know that. So, I feel optimistic about this team, but those variants, that's the thing. Chris, any final words as we wrap this up, brother?
Hey man, it's been a great offseason, man. I love the work that you've put in, man. I told you privately, and I think on social media, but I love the momentum that you're bringing into this season. I love the content that you're putting out. I love how active you've been. I love what you're doing with Hard to Paint, as a group, the Bird Calls. It's I'm just happy to see you working, man. I'm happy that we getting together. And like I mentioned, you and Kristen, but you were a star in Media Day, and I don't say that because you're my OG, you're my brother. I say that because it's real. I mean, I listened to the questions, and I kept hearing, I'm like, God damn, Grubb, that was a good ass question. That was really good. It was quick. It was balanced. It had, it had variety, and it wasn't one of those to where the player had to ask, can you repeat that? So can you ask me again? You made people think, and you got really good answers out of some folks that don't know how to give good answers, don't like giving good answers. You trick some people into answering good basketball questions. And that's awesome, man. So I like that. It's going to be regardless of what the team does, it's going to be a fun season. And I'm just happy, man. I'm happy to be here. And I'm happy that I look forward to seeing what you continue to do. And I look forward to being a part of some of the things that you can continue to do as this season, man. As always, it's good hearing from you, good talking to you. And 2 hours felt like 20 minutes, man.
Right, it really did, because I was intending to get you out in an hour, and it just really flowed with us as it does sometimes. And I appreciate that so much. A lot of folks mentioned the questions that I asked, and to get David Griffin to tell me that I gave him a good question, that was, and he and I have had some just question moments over the years, and just I was really appreciative of that, and it's I love this. I love asking those questions, because I think fans want honest answers from their team. They want to have the best idea possible. They want to support their team fully, so they want honesty. And I think they really want some insight rather than, I don't, and I'm not going to pick on anybody, but I think there were some questions that got asked that were just nobody wanted the answer to, that they weren't necessary. They were back of bubblegum card questions. And I think on Media Day, especially with this team, the stakes are such that there are questions that had to be asked. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to being around a lot more than I have been in the past. I'm looking forward to doing more content that we've done in the past. And this is going to be a regular thing for me and you. At the very least, we're going to do this twice a month, if not more often if we can. But, you're my brother, and I love bouncing stuff off of you. And I know if somebody's going to give me an honest answer, it's going to be you. So I appreciate you. And I appreciate these conversations, and I'm looking forward to 82 games of man, at the very least, it's going to be entertaining basketball. At the very least, no matter what happens, if they win 30 or they win 60, it's going to be entertaining this season.
Agree, man. Love.
All right. For my brother, Chris Connor, you can check him out on Boo Crew Media. You can check him out at Impatient Bull on your social media. Check him out there. And of course, you can find me here on the Bird Calls, Hard to Paint, and thebirdwrites.com. And don't forget to check out Maddie Hudak if you're into Tulane, because Tulane is rolling right now. The Green Wave is rolling. 30 points or more in the last 4 games. So Wave doing their thing, man. So check them out. Check her out on Before the Whistle as well. So for my man, Chris Connor, I am David Grubb. And this has been The Bird Calls. And in the words of my man, Preston Ellis, let's go, Pels.